The clock strikes midnight, and the air thickens with something unseen. A hush falls over the world, as if the night itself is listening, waiting. Welcome back, Wanderer, to the Storyteller's Garden. But tonight, the path you walk is shrouded in shadow. You've stepped into Evelina's midnight murmurs, where time twists, where secrets sigh between the walls, and where some whispers are meant only for those brave enough to listen. They say desire and fear are two sides of the same coin. Both can pull you in, both can make your pulse quicken. Blackthorn Academy has long been forgotten by the world, abandoned to dust and rumor. But what lingers there is far from forgotten. A name half erased by time, a curse that does not forgive, and a girl who stepped too close to the past, only to feel it reach for her in the dark. But you are still here, curious, tempted, perhaps even entranced. So lean in. Let the night close around you like a whispered promise, because tonight we slip into the shadows. And if you listen closely, you might just hear them whisper back. This is Shadows of the Forgotten. And once you let the past in, it may never let you go. A chill wind howled through the crumbling arches of Blackthorn Academy as twilight surrendered to the oppressive darkness of night. The school, once a beacon of academic excellence, now lay shrouded in whispers of old curses and unspeakable tragedies. Its corridors were silent, but for the echoes of past misfortunes, a constant reminder that some secrets were better left buried. Lydia Margrave, a reserved yet determined young woman, had been assigned to Blackthorn Academy as part of a government scholarship. Rumors about the school had circulated for years, each story more macabre than the last. Though Lydia was skeptical of ghost stories, she could not shake the unsettling feeling that accompanied her every step upon the ancient campus grounds. As Lydia made her way through the narrow, dimly lit hallways on her first evening, she was drawn to a peculiar door at the end of a corridor. Its worn brass handle and faded plaque bore a single word: Annex. She paused, feeling as if unseen eyes were tracking her movements. In that moment, the past and the present converged, a sensation both unnerving and compelling. The room beyond was a forgotten archive, filled with brittle ledgers, yellowed photographs, and tattered school registers. Among these relics lay a leather-bound diary, its pages brimming with cryptic entries and somber accounts of unexplained disappearances. The diary spoke of a curse that had afflicted a particular class for generations, a curse said to invite untimely deaths upon those who dared to uncover its dark truth. Lydia's curiosity was piqued. Although every instinct urged her to leave the diary undisturbed, a strange compulsion to learn more overcame her. She pocketed the diary, unaware that her fateful decision had set in motion a series of events that would unravel the very fabric of the Academy's grim legacy. The following day, Lydia found herself seated in Classroom 13, a room notorious among the students for its inexplicable aura of melancholy. The space was antiquated, with creaking wooden desks, faded murals depicting long-forgotten school legends, and a single ominous chalkboard that appeared to bear the remnants of past lessons. The teacher, Mr. Ashcroft, an austere man with a gaze that seemed to pierce through time, introduced the class without ever mentioning the room's troubled history. Lydia soon learned that Classroom 13 had been the epicenter of mysterious tragedies over the decades. Whispers in the corridors claimed that every generation, one student was fated to vanish under unexplained circumstances, a chilling cycle that no one could halt. While most students dismissed these accounts as mere superstition, the pallor in their eyes hinted at a deeper, unspoken dread. Late that evening, as a storm brewed overhead, Lydia secluded herself in her small dormitory room. The diary she had stolen from the archive lay open on her desk. The entries recounted a series of strange occurrences, phantom footsteps echoing in empty halls, disembodied voices reciting sorrowful verses, and the inexplicable reappearance of an empty desk in the classroom that had not been there before. One entry in particular detailed the disappearance of a student named Evelina, whose fate was forever entwined with the curse of Classroom 13. Unable to sleep, Lydia resolved to visit the classroom after lights out. With the diary tucked under her arm, she crept through the winding corridors, guided only by the pallid glow of her flashlight. The silence was absolute, the only sound the distant rumble of thunder. As she reached Classroom 13, the door creaked open with an almost welcoming groan. Inside, the room was bathed in ghostly light that emanated from a broken window high on the wall. Her heart pounded as she surveyed the room. There, in the far corner, sat an antique desk, a desk that seemed conspicuously out of place amidst the orderly rows of student seats. The desk was draped in a tattered cloth, its surface marred by the stains of old, dried ink. Lydia hesitated before reaching out, as if the desk might come to life at her touch. Yet, the allure of uncovering its secrets was irresistible. As her fingers brushed against the cold wood, a faint whisper filled the air, a sound indistinguishable from a sigh. The whisper grew louder, forming words in a voice that was both distant and achingly familiar. "Remember me." Lydia's blood ran cold. The spectral plea seemed to carry the weight of centuries, echoing from a time when the school was fresh with promise rather than marred by sorrow. In the days that followed, Lydia's world was irrevocably altered. Her dreams were haunted by visions of shadowy figures and endless rows of identical desks. In one recurring nightmare, she found herself sitting at that very antique desk, surrounded by a sea of ghostly classmates whose vacant eyes bore silent testimony to their lost lives. Their murmurs filled her ears, a chorus of despair that threatened to overwhelm her sanity. Determined to break the cycle, Lydia immersed herself in the diary's contents. The entries hinted at a ritual, a desperate attempt by past students to appease the restless spirit that haunted Classroom 13. It was said that the spirit was not malevolent by nature, but rather the tormented soul of a student wronged by fate. To bring peace to the cursed cycle, one must perform an act of remembrance, to acknowledge the lost, and to absolve the burden of their unfulfilled lives. The task, however, was fraught with peril. Every attempt to break the curse had been met with inexplicable calamities, a sudden illness, a fatal accident, or an eerie disappearance. Yet Lydia believed that understanding was the first step toward redemption. If she could piece together the fragments of history, perhaps she could also mend the present. Late one stormy night, Lydia returned to the classroom with a resolve born of desperation. She arranged a small circle of candles around the antique desk and, clutching the diary, began to recite the passages that had been penned in trembling script. The words reverberated through the silence, mingling with the sound of raindrops drumming on the broken window. As she spoke, the temperature plummeted, and a palpable heaviness descended upon the room. For a long, heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, in the flickering candlelight, Lydia saw a figure emerge from the shadows, a translucent, sorrowful visage of a girl whose eyes brimmed with an otherworldly sadness. The spirit's presence was both mournful and mesmerizing, her form slowly materializing until she stood before Lydia in spectral clarity. "Who are you?" Lydia whispered, voice trembling with both awe and fear. The ghostly figure tilted her head, her lips parting in a silent lament. In a voice that was barely audible, she replied, "I am Evelina, and I am forever bound to this place." Her eyes, like pools of endless grief, searched Lydia's face as if seeking recognition. Evelina recounted the story of her demise, a tale of jealousy, isolation, and a tragic misunderstanding that had led to her untimely death. In life, she had been an outcast, misunderstood by peers, and neglected by those who should have offered solace. In death, she became the unwitting guardian of Classroom 13, doomed to wander its confines until her story was told and her memory honored. Tears welled in Lydia's eyes as she listened to Evelyn's whispered confessions. She vowed to set things right, to free Evelyn from the shackles of a curse that had persisted for far too long. But as the spectral figure faded into the night, a sense of foreboding lingered, a silent warning that tampering with fate could unleash consequences beyond her control. In the following weeks, strange phenomena began to plague the academy. Unexplained shadows darted along the corridors at night, and students whispered of a chilling presence that lurked behind every closed door. The atmosphere in Classroom 13 grew increasingly oppressive. Despite the growing unease, Lydia remained steadfast in her quest for answers. She scoured the ancient records housed in the annex, piecing together the fragmented histories of those who had perished under the curse. Each name was a testament to a life abruptly ended, a series of tragedies woven into the fabric of the school's legacy. With each discovery, Lydia felt the weight of responsibility pressing upon her. How could she possibly mend a chain of events that spanned generations? Her research led her to an obscure reference in a faded journal. It spoke of a clandestine gathering, a midnight assembly where the students of Classroom 13, in a desperate bid to confront their fate, had attempted to perform a ritual of absolution. The ritual, it was said, required the collective remembrance of the deceased, a somber acknowledgement of their lost dreams and unfulfilled futures. Only then could the cycle of despair be broken. Lydia resolved to recreate the ritual, gathering a small group of trusted friends who had also been touched by the strange happenings at the academy. Among them were Marcus, a skeptical yet loyal companion; Selena, whose intuitive grasp of the supernatural was both uncanny and unnerving; and Julian, a quiet scholar whose knowledge of occult lore rivaled that of ancient mystics. On a night when the moon was shrouded by turbulent clouds, the quartet convened in Classroom 13. With trembling hands, Lydia laid out the diary and the mementos of those lost souls, the faded photographs, the scribbled notes, and the relics that bore witness to lives abruptly halted. Candles were arranged in a perfect circle, their flames dancing like ephemeral guardians against the encroaching darkness. As the ritual commenced, each participant took turns recounting the life of one of the lost students. Their voices merged into a solemn chorus of remembrance, a litany of names, hopes, and regrets. Lydia spoke last, her voice steady despite the quiver of emotion that rippled beneath the surface. "Tonight," she intoned, "we gather not to invoke sorrow, but to honor the lives that have been cut short. We acknowledge your pain, and we vow to remember you so that your souls may finally find rest." The candles flickered violently as if stirred by an unseen force, and the room plunged into an unnatural silence. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to pause. Then, in the deep gloom, the antique desk began to tremble. Dust and shadows swirled around it, and a spectral glow emerged from within the wood grain. The assembled friends gasped as they witnessed a scene from the past unfold before their eyes. A fleeting tableau of a classroom filled with vibrant life, abruptly interrupted by a moment of unspeakable tragedy. In that spectral vision, Lydia saw Evelyn once more, but this time, the ghost's expression was one of serene acceptance rather than despair. Evelyn's eyes met Lydia's, and in them, she conveyed a silent plea to break the chains of sorrow and release the burden of an age-old curse. With the final utterance of the ritual, the vision shattered like fragile glass, leaving behind a lingering sense of melancholy and hope intertwined. In the days that followed, an almost imperceptible shift took place within Blackthorn Academy. The oppressive aura that had long haunted Classroom 13 began to dissipate, replaced by a tentative sense of renewal. Though whispers of doubt still echoed in the halls, there was now a fragile optimism, a belief that perhaps the curse had been appeased, if only for a moment. Yet Lydia could not shake the feeling that the balance had only been temporarily restored. There were questions that remained unanswered. Had the ritual truly freed Evelyn's soul, or had it merely delayed an inevitable reckoning? Each night, as Lydia walked the deserted corridors, she could still hear the echo of a forlorn whisper, one that reminded her that the past was never truly at rest. Late one evening, as she sat in her dormitory reflecting on the events of the ritual, a soft knock at her door startled her. Opening it, she found a single wilted white rose resting on the threshold, a symbol of remembrance and forgiveness. Tucked beneath the rose was a note, its faded ink spelling out a message in delicate script. "Until we meet again, do not forget." The words resonated with Lydia, a bittersweet reminder that the cycle of memory and loss was eternal. In that moment, she realized that her journey was not one of definitive closure, but rather an ongoing quest to honor the past while seeking solace in the present. The curse, like the shadows of the forgotten, might always linger at the edges of Blackthorn Academy, but with each act of remembrance, its power could be diminished. As dawn broke over the ancient walls of the academy, Lydia stood before classroom 13 one final time. The room, bathed in the gentle light of early morning, no longer seemed to exude the same malevolent energy. The antique desk sat silently in the corner, a mute witness to the passage of time and the resilience of memory. In that quiet moment, Lydia understood that the true horror lay not in the supernatural events that had transpired, but in the human capacity to forget, to allow sorrow to be buried beneath layers of indifference. Evelina's midnight murmurs had always been a conduit for the voices of those long silenced, and tonight, as the echoes of the forgotten mingled with the soft rustle of morning, Lydia vowed to carry their stories forward. For in every whispered secret and every mournful murmur, there was a lesson. That remembrance was both a burden and a gift. The curse of Classroom 13 might have been born of tragedy and despair, but through the courage to confront it, a spark of hope had been kindled. And as long as there were those willing to listen to the midnight murmurs of the past, the legacy of the lost would never be truly forgotten. In the quiet of that new day, Lydia took a deep breath and stepped away from the door of Classroom 13, the memory of Evelyn's sad smile lingering in her mind. Though uncertainty still lay ahead, one truth remained clear. Sometimes, the scariest specters are not those that haunt the night, but those that reside within the heart. And so, the murmurs fade once more. But tell me, dear listener, did you hear them? The whispers between the words, the shadows shifting just beyond sight? Or did you, like Lydia, feel the weight of something forgotten pressing at the edges of your mind? Perhaps it was only a story, or perhaps some echoes never truly fade. Some places, like Blackthorn Academy, do not let go so easily. They remember. They hold tight to the ones who have walked their halls, the ones who have vanished, the ones whose names are etched into brittle pages and whispered through time. And in return, they ask only one thing: to be remembered in turn. Tell me, did you feel it? That soft, persistent pull? That creeping awareness that some stories refuse to be just that? That maybe, just maybe, the past lingers closer than we think? If this tale follows you into the quiet of the night, if you find yourself glancing over your shoulder or hesitating before stepping into an empty room, let me know. Cast your vote in this week's poll. Was it my tale that sent the shiver down your spine? Or will Sophia's enchanted touch bring you a different kind of chill? The choice is yours, but choose wisely. Some stories don't like to be forgotten, and some whispers, once heard, never truly leave you alone. And if the darkness feels too heavy, If the murmurs grow too loud, then return this Friday, when Sophia's Enchanted Evenings will welcome you into something softer, something warm, a place where love lingers instead of ghosts, though even the sweetest dreams can cast long shadows. But until then, stay safe, stay wary, and whatever you do, don't listen too closely when the murmurs call your name.